Hello and welcome to 3 Inning Fan, the podcast with me, Kelley Franco. I am so excited to kick off this hot stove season with this Mets and Yankees preview. Let's get at it. Hot stove season is long. Last year, it stretched all the way into spring training while we waited for players like Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell to sign. Will that happen again? I hope not. I don't think it's good for anyone, clubs, players, or fans. I want to know who my guys are by the time pitchers and catchers report. Snell and Montgomery were, of course, Scott Boras' clients. Boras didn't have a good 2023 offseason. He wants to have a good 2024. He has Gerrit Cole, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Sean Manaea, and others. How will he do this year? Let's start off with his megastar client, Juan Soto, and the Juan Soto Sweepstakes. Okay, let's just look at this from 20,000 feet. Several big market teams could be in on Juan Soto. Dodgers, Yankees, Mets, those are the headliners. But there could be some surprises. Phillies, Blue Jays, Nationals. These are some names of clubs that are maybe tired of being the groomsman and not the groom. Soto is a generational talent, made so by his ability and his youth. We generally don't see megastars hit the free agent market this young. He just turned 26. So what are my thoughts on the Yankees and Mets' pursuit of Soto? Hal Steinbrenner needs to gun it hard for Soto. Yankee fans love him. He had an amazing year. He was a key in getting them to the World Series. If these are the Yankees I grew up with, they get him. If they don't get him, they're not the Yankees. On the other hand, the Mets. There's no excuse for Stephen A. Cohen not to pay the most. Both Hal Steinbrenner and Cohen will press hard for him. But Steve Cohen is Steve Cohen. And if he really wants to blow the roof off this thing, he can do it like nobody else. Any other team has to make choices. If they want to acquire this player, maybe they can't get that player. If they want this guy, they can't get that guy. That's not the way it is with Cohen. He doesn't have to do that. Not that he won't act rationally, okay? He's not going to be irrational, but he can have much more leeway in determining what he considers rational. David Stearns did a brilliant job as president of baseball ops for the Mets in 2024. And who knows, maybe Cohen tells him he gets to make the decision on Soto. Stearns may say, let's offer a lot to Soto, but we don't need to blow the roof off this thing because we have a good team and because they plan to acquire some other pieces to make it even better. And there are some good pieces out there. Soto turned down $440 million from the Nationals in 2022. Kind of a bold move for a young guy, wouldn't you say? And Scott Boras is his agent, okay? Soto has played for the Nationals, he's played for the Padres, and he's played for the Yankees. He seems okay with moving around. I believe he's going to follow the money. I think Soto goes for the record-setting contract. And if the numbers are close and the Yankees are one of the final suitors, I think he'll pick the Yankees, but only if the numbers are close. Look, he likes New York, and I bet he likes hitting in front of Judge. It's a legendary duo. They want to be like Ruth and Gehrig. He could be in Monument Park all day, all of that. But that's just if the money's equal or close. If it's not, I think he's just going to go for the highest bidder. I even think he could choose a contract structure not unlike Shohei Ohtani's, with the massive deferrals paid without interest, if it means he can surpass Ohtani's $700 million contract. Now, remember that, of course, the $700 million contract was a $460 million contract dressed up as a $700 million contract due to the massive deferrals that were paid without interest. The key is without interest. It actually lowered how that contract was valued for the competitive balance tax and also just for the everyday tools we use to evaluate the net present value of money. Now, Boras is not huge into deferrals, but he did do it with Scherzer's contract in 2015. So if you consider that Ohtani's average annual value for his $700 million contract, which was really a $460 million contract, was $46 million a year, that's Soto's target to break. Given his youth, I think he can get a 14-year deal somewhere. And yes, he'll be cooked by the end of it. We all know that. And if he wants at least $46 million a year, that's a floor of $644 million. Yes, my friends, we are looking at ball players who will be billionaires. So one possible issue here, just to be a little pragmatic, he is an average defender with a very good arm. Maybe some might even say below average defender, okay? So some people, some scouts and all, think that he could be a DH in 5 years. So one thing you have to look out for is a clog for some teams in the DH role. So if you look at the Dodgers, who are using Shohei Ohtani as a DH these days, then that could be a clog up in the DH role if they were to acquire Soto, and in 5 years, Soto was most suitable to be a DH. Last word on Soto, what I call the domino issue. Hit it. Oh, domino. There's your Van Morrison for the day. The domino issue is that Soto is likely the domino that needs to fall before a whole bunch of other players get signed. So if you have these teams that are chasing Soto and allocating the funds for Soto, and only one of those teams is going to get him, obviously, all those other teams, as soon as they realize they've missed out on Soto, are going to have to scurry to sign all these other guys. So it creates a kind of a bottleneck around Soto, not just for the teams, but for those players who are waiting to be signed. So we're going to have perhaps, if his signing goes into January, we are going to have a free agent population in limbo. All right, let's talk about the Mets here. And speaking of free agent populations, they have a very large free agent population. They have, including Pete Alonso, Jose Iglesias, Jesse Winker, Harrison Bader, J.D. Martinez, Luis Severino, Ryan Stanek, Phil Maton. The Mets just declined his option. Adam Ottavino, Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana. The Mets payroll is going from about $317 million to about $158 million. What will they be like this offseason? Like me in Nordstrom's. So let's focus on a few of these. First, Pete Alonso. Aside from the Soto Sweepstakes, he is the most riveting saga of this offseason. At least in terms of Mets fans. Did Pete Alonso salvage his Metsdom with one swing of the bat? If it's possible to get yourself a new contract with one swing, Pete Alonso could have done it with his winning 3-run homer against the Brewers in Game 3 of the National League Wild Card Round. So the question is, do the Mets resign him? Alonso is a fan favorite. He was drafted by the Mets in the second round in 2016. He was Rookie of the Year in 2019. He was the first MLB rookie to hit 53 home runs. Mets fans and management would love to see him follow in the footsteps of Brandon Nimmo and be a Met for life. At a price. I don't think the sky is the limit for Pete. Joel Sherman of the New York Post reported, and this was some time ago, that the Mets attempted to sign Pete in June of 2023 for 7 years, $158 million, which would have covered both his final year of ARB eligibility plus 6 more seasons. That would have been under the Billy Epler GM regime. David Stearns is now president of baseball ops, so we've got a different regime in charge now. Also, Pete had a different agent at the time. He now has Scott Boras. I think the fans want to see Steve Cohen make a reasonable, competitive effort to retain Alonso. If Alonso had had a blockbuster season, the fans would be clamoring for him to stay, but he didn't. The swing in Milwaukee brought up the number to keep him, but it didn't blow it into the stratosphere. But let me be an Alonso defender for a second here. Alonso has proven that he can play in New York. That's an intangible that doesn't show up on the balance sheet. when you try to quantify players in terms of their value and all these fancy stats, you've got to figure whether or not they can play in New York. And that just can't be quantified. And you have to be wary of replacing him with someone who's better on paper but can't handle the spotlight. And of course, the problem with these players who can't handle New York is that you don't know it until you've paid a lot of money for them and they're already in New York. So what do the Mets do if they can't re-sign Alonso, or if they don't re-sign Alonso? Maybe move Vientos to first. This is what I'm thinking. And then you get yourself a new third baseman. Alex Bregman could be someone you re-sign. Another idea that could work is getting Willy Adames, the spectacular shortstop, formerly known as a Milwaukee Brewer. And he could come over and play third base. And again, Vientos to first. So there are options. Let's look a little bit at the show behind the show here, because this is fascinating to me. Don't forget that Juan Soto and Pete Alonso have the same agent, Scott Boras. Now, it's done all the time in sports where guys share the same agent who may be negotiating for both guys with the same team. It's a foreign concept to me as an attorney, because in my profession, that would be a perceived conflict to take clients in that position, and we wouldn't be permitted to do it. But professions are different, and this is how they do it in sports, and apparently it's 100% accepted, so I'm not saying anything's wrong with it, but I just think it's really interesting to think about. Speaking of Scott Boras, there's another Scott Boras client who is a former Met, Sean Manaea. Manaea declined his $13.5 million option as expected, and as he well should, given his spectacular year. And he's testing the market. He will get more than that on the free agent market. Boras will market him as an ace, and he should be marketed that way. Any team would be lucky to have Manaea in the number 2 or even the number 1 spot if he can keep up his performance from last year, especially the second half. The Mets should pursue him hard. Yeah, you have Snell, Fried, and Burns out there, all great choices. But like with Alonso, Manaea has proven he can play in New York. He loved New York. He used to take the subway to the games at Citi Field. Okay, you gotta love that. The Mets have a bunch of other guys who are free agents. The list is long. Guys like Winker and Iglesias were good fits, but I'm wondering if they might want to go somewhere where they can be everyday players, even though I think they really liked being Mets. Severino was a solid reclamation project this year, and he could seek a multi-year deal now. J.D. Martinez will probably go elsewhere. The Mets declined Maton's $7.75 million club option. Quintana, I would take on a 1 or 2 year deal. Ottavino, I think there'd be a revolution among my Mets ex-followers if the Mets brought him back, although the truth is, on paper, he did not have a bad year. Who got qualifying offers on the Mets? The Mets issued the $21.05 million qualifying offer to Alonso, Manaea, and Severino. Now, Alonso and Manaea will definitely reject it. Severino could take it. If I'm pushed to guess, I'm going to say he doesn't, but he could. And let me tell you why I think it's a possibility. He had a good year, but not a great year, and he had a rough 2023. And that rough year might loom in some potential suitors' memories. That, plus him costing a draft pick, which is what happens if he rejects the QO, could be enough for potential suitors to take a pass. And Severino's only 30 years old. He could do a 1-year deal, the QO, with the Mets, and then hope for a lucrative long-term deal next offseason. And now, just to wind up on the Mets, who should the Mets target? And, of course, besides Soto. So it's always about the pitching. Right now, the Mets have Senga and Peterson. Like, all their pitchers are gone, technically. If they re-sign Manaea, Quintana, and or Severino, their starter shopping list will get shorter. Other starters to consider are Max Fried, Corbin Burns, and, oh, by the way, Stearns knows Corbin Burns from back in their Milwaukee Brewers days, so there's a relationship there. Blake Snell, Jack Flaherty, Walker Buehler, these guys are available. Gerrit Crochet is another name out there, but there may be some concerns about his durability. But the bullpen could use some upgrades as well. I'd love to see Tanner Scott, that free agent lefty reliever out of the Padres, who I really wanted to see in New York at the trade deadline last year. They could also trade for someone like Devin Williams of the Brewers and upgrade that bullpen. And who might the Mets trade? I'd keep an eye on Brett Baty, not a surprise. And I was thinking Jeff McNeil might be on the trading block. His name was floated at the trade deadline in 2023. But Stern said yesterday he was comfortable, that was his word, comfortable, having McNeil at second for 2025. Thank you to my followers Jane Mitch and Russ O'Brien for passing that one on. If the Mets acquire an outfielder like Soto or maybe Santander, then maybe we're looking at Starling Marte leaving the team. Will the Mets get Soto plus other valuable starters and Tanner Scott? They should. Is it a lot to spend? Yes. But the whole point of having Steve Cohen as your owner is that you don't have to make choices. You should be able to get all of these pieces that you want. And believe me, if the Mets could pry Soto away from the Yankees, it would be a huge victory for the team and their fans. Steve Cohen has earned so much credit with Mets fans, and I think it really started. I mean, they liked him from the get-go, but I think it really started when he traded away Verlander and Scherzer in the middle of 2023, and he paid to do that. It was a turning point. It showed that he was not afraid of spending money and then re-spending money. Cohen, at that point, he said, you know what? The plan's not working, and he just changed course. And honestly, I think it's a reflection of his profession. This idea that you don't want to be emotionally involved with your investments. If they're not producing a return, cut your losses. The question is, how will that manifest itself this offseason? Steve Cohen is really turning into one of the most loved owners in the game, and for good reason. He's a fan. He spends the money necessary to win, and you can feel the thought processes and the tinkering that he and David Stearns go through to try to put together a really winning club. And of course, he is ridiculously rich. Yankees. We're talking about the Yankees now. The Yankees are going to have some choices to make, whether or not they can hold on to Juan Soto. How are they going to select their supporting actors? One of the flaws I felt that the Yankees had this season was a weakness among their secondary players. There were games where Jahmai Jones was the DH. These are the New York Yankees. Come on. So one thing I'll be watching is how Cashman builds the team around Cole, Judge, and Soto, or maybe just Cole and Judge. First, though, let's talk about Aaron Boone. The club has an option on him for 2025, and they will probably pick that up. The question is, will he get extended so he's not a lame duck manager? Boone didn't have a good World Series, okay? He made several decisions that got second-guessed, and many fans blamed him for the Yankees' defensive miscues that really tilted the series toward the Dodgers. I personally did not blame him for those defensive miscues. And now this is one of my opinions that after I offer it, especially if I do it on X, I have to run for cover. But I think Boone should be extended. He got the Yankees to the World Series. He's gotten them to the playoffs in 6 of the 7 seasons that he's been there. Does he make mistakes? Yes. But every manager does. And I think Boone gets blamed for them more often than most. Why? Well, maybe because it's New York. Maybe it's because he's a shield for his players. He's always saying he's close when the guy's in a slump, or he's not going to make that mistake again, believe me, after a player messes up. I think Boone is smart, and I think he sticks up for his players. And just personally, loyalty is a very important quality to me. Has Boone won a World Series? No. But given the expanded playoff format, it's just a lot harder than it used to be because there is a much broader field. All right, let's talk quickly about the Yankee free agents. And all of these, except Soto, are fungible here, okay? So you got Soto, left-handed pitcher Tim Hill, Clay Holmes, Tommy Cannelly, Jonathan Loaizaga, Anthony Rizzo, whose option we've declined. We're going to chat about that in a sec. Gleyber Torres, Lou Trevino, they declined his option. Alex Verdugo, Gerrit Cole, who opted out. He and the Yankees are now reunited, and it feels so good. So let's start with him. Gerrit Cole. 2024 was the 5th year of Gerrit Cole's 9-year contract with the Yankees. It was a $324 million contract, and so it straight lined to $36 million annually. His contract included a player option to opt out after this season. He exercised it. His contract had a clause stating that if he opted out, the Yankees could void the opt-out automatically by adding a 10th year for $36 million. At that time, he would be 38. But the Yankees didn't bite. Why? Maybe they didn't want 38-year-old Cole on the team someday. Maybe they didn't think he was worth the extra $36 million. Maybe they just knew they could. But my guess is that Brian Cashman had a heart-to-heart with Cole or Boras, said the extension isn't going to happen, and why don't we just tell the world we're sticking with the contract as if you had never opted out, Gerrit Cole? And my guess is that Cole thought about the possibility of free agency, the uncertainty it brings, the lobbying for your price, the examination under the microscope, and don't forget the personal toll. Do you have to move your family? Do you have to put the kids in a new school? Do you have to find a new house? All over the winter, one winter. And Cole, in the timeless words of Gilda Radner playing Emily Latella, said, "Never mind." And no matter how you slice it, Boras started off his 2024 offseason with a loss. All right, let's talk about Anthony Rizzo because this was a really interesting case. Anthony Rizzo had a $17 million club option with a $6 million buyout, and the Yankees declined the option. So, and it was a club option, if I didn't say that. So I thought it might be handy to discuss how club options worked and how buyouts work. So let's do a super quick contract lesson here. The club option is an optional year at the end of a player's contract that is exercised at the club's discretion. It usually comes with a buyout, not always, but it can come with a buyout that the club has to pay if the club declines to pick up the option. Club options give the team control over the player without guaranteeing the contract. But if the buyout is sizable, it's leverage for the player because a club may overpay to exercise an option rather than having to pay a buyout and not get anything for it. So in the present case, since Rizzo had a $6 million buyout, when the Yankees declined the option, they paid Rizzo $6 million to leave for nothing. Not a bad gig, right? So that's why the negotiation of the buyout is such a key part of a contract way back at the beginning of the process when a player and his agent are negotiating that contract. I wasn't disappointed that the Yankees let Rizzo go. The Yankees need a first baseman who can hit for power. These are the New York Yankees. Rizzo was up in a clutch spot in Game 5 of the World Series. The game and the series were on the line, and a graphic popped up saying he hadn't hit a home run in his last 111 at-bats. Come on! This is the first baseman, a power position. This is the first baseman for the New York Yankees. And yes, I realize that the Yankees could use a power-hitting first baseman, and there just happens to be one who is a free agent just right over in Queens. What if the Mets got Soto and the Yankees got Alonso? it would be like when those two ball players traded wives back in the 1970s. I can't remember their names, but I know one of my listeners will. The Yankees declined Lou Trevino's $5 million option. Remember, that's the reliever, not to be confused with Jose Trevino, the catcher, and gave a big yes to Luke Weaver's $2.5 million club option. That was a bargain for Dream Weaver. Who do the Yankees need? I'll tell you what they need. They need to deepen their lineup. Luis Severino made that crack last year about the Yankees having only two good hitters. There was some truth to it, let's be honest. So even if they re-sign Soto, they've got some issues to fix here. If they lose Soto, they'll need a right fielder and a slugger. We talked about the need for a first baseman with Rizzo's option declined, and they may need a second baseman since they didn't issue Gleyber Torres either a new contract or the qualifying offer. They could still try to do a deal with him, or they could move Jazz Chisholm to second or find someone totally new at second. And of course, the bullpen will need new arms or the re-signing of some of these free agents like Tommy Canley. The bullpen was unsettled in 2024. It actually ended on a decent note once Luke Weaver fell into the role as closer. But it got unsettled mid-year due to the changing role of Clay Holmes and how he really struggled in the closer role. And you know what? It'd be nice if they didn't have to fly by the seat of their pants for 2025. Let's get this bullpen in order so we know how we are rolling. Who could be on the trading block? Well, Marcus Stroman. He was on the World Series roster, but I don't think he even warmed up. Jason Dominguez? Now that would be a story. We didn't get to see him much as an everyday player. He didn't impress defensively, and the Yankees relied on Verdugo in the World Series due to his glove. And Verdugo had some good hits in the postseason, at least in the ALDS. Hal Steinbrenner has said that the Yankees' payroll is not sustainable. So if they're going to re-sign Soto and keep Judge, Cole, and Stanton, all big-ticket guys, I don't know how much other shopping they can do this winter. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here, but I just want to talk quickly about some free agents to watch around MLB because we focused on the Mets and the Yankees today, but just some guys you're going to want to keep your eyes on this offseason. Corbin Burns, 2021 Cy Young winner and righty pitcher. We discussed him. Alex Bregman, 31-year-old third baseman who's had a home in Houston for years. He's a free agent. Willy Adames, we discussed, 29-year-old shortstop out of the Brewers. Great year, probably pricing himself out of the Milwaukee market. Blake Snell, two-time Cy Young winner, stalled out as one of the Boras 4 last offseason, had a rough first half, but really killed it in the second half. Max Fried, 31-year-old lefty. We talked about Anthony Santander, 30-year-old right fielder and switch hitting slugger for the Orioles. Will they pay to keep him? I don't know. They got some new management there. Maybe they need to flash some dollars. And we have a long winter ahead. Like Al Green sang, "Let's stay together." Whether times are good or bad, or happy or sad. Oh, wait, let's close with what's good to eat while watching the ball game, because it's what we do. Last night, I made the most delicious chicken thighs. Everyone who knows food knows that the chicken thigh is the tastiest piece of the chicken. The meat never dries out, and it's so flavorful, and you just cook the skin until it's crackling and maybe like a tiny bit blistered in spots. So this recipe I made was from Melissa Clark from the New York Times, and it was called sheet pan paprika chicken with tomatoes and Parmesan. So you put your chicken on the sheet pan, surround it with sliced poblano peppers. If you don't know these, they're green, dark green and cone-shaped, not spicy, and so superior to a regular green pepper, which honestly I consider a bit of an armpit of a vegetable. And so you put those poblanos in, and then you put some cherry tomatoes around those and the chicken. You toss everything with oil, paprika, oregano, and other good stuff. And then you give it a generous coating of Parmesan cheese. Yes, Parmesan cheese on roast chicken. Where have you been all my life? Like, I didn't even know you could do that. It was crispy and delicious. Okay, that's it for this week. I will be going to an alternate week schedule this off season. We're going to follow the hot stove every step of the way. In between, I'll be on X and maybe some 3-inning minute videos thrown in. So I will see you next time. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.